30 heavy metal icons who slept with everybody. What if the wildest stories in heavy metal didn't happen on stage, but behind closed doors? You've seen the chaos, the screaming crowds, the smashed guitars, the fire, the sweat, the madness. But when the curtain dropped and the tour buses pulled away, a different kind of frenzy began. Backstage rooms turned into playgrounds. Hotel suites became revolving doors. Fame opened every lock, and temptation never knocked twice. These weren't just rock stars, they were living myths. Some treated love like a game. Others chased thrill after thrill, city after city. Rumors spread fast, but the truth? It was even louder. These are 30 heavy metal icons who slept with everybody. 30. Bruce Dickinson. When people think about heavy metal icons who lived like the world was theirs for the taking, our Bruce Dickinson stands tall in his own dramatic way. As the fearless frontman of Iron Maiden, he didn't just sing about power and adventure. He lived a life that matched the intensity of the music. Touring across continents year after year, stepping into roaring arenas filled with thousands of screaming fans, he embraced the fast pace that defined classic metal culture. During the height of Iron Maiden's fame in the 1980s, global superstardom came with non-stop travel, backstage chaos, and endless attention. Fame at that scale pulls everything into overdrive. Admirers lined up at every city stop, and the lifestyle surrounding major arena tours blurred the lines between performance and private life. Yet what makes Bruce different from many others on this list is balance. Even while surrounded by excess, he pursued fencing, writing, and even aviation, eventually flying planes for his own band. The mix of disciplined ambition and rock star freedom created a unique image. He represented the heavy metal icon who could command both the stage and the sky without losing control. Before we move deeper into this countdown of heavy metal legends who lived fast and loud, take a second to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. 29. Rob Halford. Rob Halford helped shape the very image of heavy metal rebellion. As the powerful voice behind Judas Priest, he stepped onto stages dressed in leather and studs, turning shock value into mainstream metal identity. In the late 1970s and throughout the 1980s, the band's rise brought relentless touring schedules and a fan culture that was passionate and intense. Heavy metal at that time thrived on mystery and bold energy. Halford's commanding presence and theatrical delivery attracted attention everywhere the band performed. Backstage life moved at full speed, fueled by packed venues and a reputation for living loud. The culture surrounding arena metal in those years was built on excess, and he stood at its center. What sets him apart is how he later reshaped his public image with honesty and resilience. His journey reflected both the wild spirit of classic metal and the personal strength required to endure it. Rob Halford remains a symbol of power, transformation, and unapologetic individuality in a genre built on going all the way. 28. A Sebastian Bach. When glam metal exploded across the Sunset Strip, Sebastian Bach became one of its loudest and most unpredictable faces. As the towering frontman of Skid Row, he mixed raw vocal power with a reckless stage presence that fit perfectly into the era's anything-goes culture. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the band's rise to fame happened fast, and the lifestyle that followed moved even faster. Tour buses rolled through city after city, arenas filled with screaming fans, and backstage rooms turned into non-stop celebrations. Bach's fiery personality only added fuel to the image. He was outspoken, intense, and never shy about embracing the chaos that surrounded major rock tours. The glam metal world thrived on excess, and he leaned into it fully, becoming a symbol of youth, fame, and wild freedom. In stories from those touring years describe blurred nights, headline-making behavior, and the kind of larger-than-life attitude that defined the strip scene. Sebastian Bach represented a heavy metal icon who lived boldly, loudly, and without apology during one of the most over-the-top eras in rock history. 27. James Hetfield. James Hetfield built his reputation on power, discipline, and pure intensity. As the co-founder and frontman of Metallica, he stood at the front of the thrash metal movement that reshaped heavy music in the 1980s. But behind the crushing riffs and commanding growl was a touring life that ran at full speed. Metallica's early years were relentless. Small clubs turned into massive arenas, and the pressure of fame hit hard and fast. Endless touring meant long nights, heavy drinking, and an atmosphere where everything felt amplified. The band's rise came with a rough edge, and Hetfield was right in the center of it. Unlike glam metal's flashy image, thrash metal carried a darker, more aggressive energy. The backstage environment reflected that intensity. Fame, exhaustion, and celebration blended. Over time, Hetfield openly addressed the toll that lifestyle took on him, proving that even the strongest figures in metal faced internal battles. His story shows how heavy metal icons could live fiercely while still confronting the consequences of that speed-driven world. 26. Lars Ulrich. Lars Ulrich did more than play drums. He helped steer one of the biggest metal bands in history. As Metallica's co-founder, he was deeply involved in shaping the band's rise during the explosive thrash era. With global tours stretching across continents, the lifestyle surrounding the band quickly grew intense and unpredictable. The 1980s metal scene was built on ambition and excess. Ulrich thrived in that environment. He moved through backstage gatherings, industry circles, and celebrity scenes with confidence. Fame brought endless invitations, after-show parties, and a reputation for living boldly. Metallica's rapid climb meant that private life often took a backseat to the momentum of success. Unlike some peers who leaned purely into chaos, Ulrich balanced business instinct with rock star energy. He negotiated deals, handled press, and still embraced the freedom that came with superstardom. His public relationships and high-profile social life kept his name circulating beyond music headlines. Lars Ulrich stands as a heavy metal icon who blended sharp strategy with the wild rhythm of arena-level fame. 25. C.C. DeVille. C.C. DeVille captured the flashy spirit of glam metal at its most colorful peak. As the lead guitarist of Poison, he became known for wild outfits, teased hair, and a personality that fit perfectly into the neon-lit chaos of the Sunset Strip. When the band's fame surged in the late 1980s, everything moved fast and loud. Poison's tours were packed with energy. Crowds filled arenas, music videos dominated television, and backstage scenes turned into constant celebrations. DeVille embraced the image fully. He leaned into the over-the-top fashion, the dramatic performances, and the non-stop party reputation that defined glam metal's golden moment. And the environment around major touring acts during that time encouraged excess. Late nights blended into early mornings, and boundaries often faded under the weight of fame and attention. Tensions within the band later showed how intense that lifestyle could become. Still, C.C. DeVille remains a vivid symbol of heavy metal's most flamboyant era, where style, sound, and spectacle collided without restraint. 24. Phil Collen. Phil Collen stepped into global superstardom during one of the biggest explosions in rock history. As the lead guitarist of Def Leppard during the Hysteria era, he became known for his athletic stage presence, shirtless performances, and polished glam metal image. The band's rise in the late 1980s pushed them into massive arenas around the world, where screaming fans and flashing lights never seemed to fade. And with that level of fame came constant travel, endless attention, and a backstage culture that moved fast. Glam metal at its peak thrived on image, energy, and indulgence. Colin's confident look and stage charisma drew admiration everywhere the band played. The atmosphere surrounding those tours was built on celebration and excess, and he was part of that high-speed environment. Over time, though, Colin chose a different direction. He shifted toward fitness, discipline, and a healthier lifestyle, showing that even icons surrounded by chaos could evolve. His journey reflects the contrast between glam metal's wild prime and the maturity that followed. Phil Collen remains a symbol of that era's shine while also representing growth beyond it. 23. Joe Elliott. Joe Elliott, the voice of Def Leppard, then stood at the center of one of the biggest rock movements of the 1980s. When hysteria turned the band into worldwide superstars, fame exploded overnight. Stadium tours stretched across continents, and the scale of success brought a lifestyle that was anything but quiet. Backstage culture during that period was legendary. Organized yet intense, it revolved around celebration, long nights, and the thrill of being at the top of the music world. Elliott carried himself with confidence and charm, becoming the face of a band that defined arena rock glamour. Everywhere Def Leppard traveled, admiration followed. The magnitude of that fame meant constant motion. Interviews, performances, travel, and social gatherings blended. While some chaos surrounded the era, Elliott often appeared more controlled compared to other wild figures of the time. Still, he lived inside the same high-energy storm that defined heavy metal's most excessive years. Joe Elliott represents the polished but powerful side of that unforgettable rock explosion. 22. Carmine Appice. Carmine Appice built his name long before glam metal dominated the charts. As a drummer who played with major rock legends across decades, he witnessed firsthand the evolution of heavy music's wild reputation. Touring during the 70s and 80s meant stepping into an industry where excess was common and boundaries were often ignored. Appice became known not only for his powerful drumming, but also for his larger-than-life stories. He openly spoke about the extreme environment that surrounded classic rock tours, describing a world fueled by fame, temptation, and non-stop movement. Being part of multiple successful projects placed him at the center of scenes where celebration rarely paused. Unlike younger glam stars, Appice experienced the early blueprint of rock excess before it became mainstream spectacle. He saw how touring culture shaped reputations and defined public images. His perspective adds depth to the history of heavy metal's most indulgent years. Carmine Appice stands as both participant and witness to decades of high-volume living. 21. Dee Snider. Dee Snider burst into mainstream attention as the rebellious face of Twisted Sister. With towering hair, bold makeup, and defiant energy, he embodied the theatrical side of heavy metal in the 1980s. The band's sudden rise brought them from clubs to packed arenas, and the lifestyle surrounding that climb reflected pure intensity. Touring at that level meant constant motion and non-stop interaction with fans. The glam era celebrated shock value, and Snider's image amplified that spirit. Backstage life carried the same high-voltage energy as the performances themselves. Fame delivered freedom, but it also created pressure to live larger than life. Over time, Snider's public image shifted. He moved from wild metal rebel to outspoken advocate and family man, proving that reinvention was possible even after years inside rock's most chaotic culture. His early career still captures the raw spirit of heavy metal excess. Dee Snider remains a powerful symbol of rebellion, spectacle, and transformation within the genre's most dramatic era. 20. Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent built his reputation on volume, aggression, and controversy. Long before debates surrounded his public persona, he was already known as a high-energy guitarist who lived with intensity both on and off the stage. During the 1970s and 80s, his tours were loud, packed, and fueled by a fearless image that matched his explosive sound. Nugent's persona leaned into raw masculinity and bold statements. That attitude carried into the touring culture that followed him from city to city. Backstage life during those years often blurred into late-night gatherings, celebrity circles, and the constant motion that came with national fame. He cultivated a larger-than-life identity that fed directly into heavy metal's mythology of excess. While later decades shifted focus toward his outspoken political stance, his earlier rock years cemented his place among icons associated with wild touring culture. Ted Nugent represented a period when heavy music, ego, and controversy combined into a single unstoppable force that refused to play quietly. 19. Blackie Lawless. Blackie Lawless turned shock into spectacle. As the driving force behind WASP, he built an image designed to provoke, disturb, and command attention. In the 1980s, when heavy metal competed for the loudest and boldest identity, Lawless pushed theatrics to the extreme. Stage props, dramatic costumes, and confrontational lyrics made every performance feel dangerous. That same intensity followed him off stage. Touring during the glam and shock metal era meant entering an environment where limits rarely existed. Fame, controversy, and curiosity surrounded him everywhere the band traveled. The buzz around WASP fueled a reputation that blended performance art with rock excess. Yet beyond the chaos was calculated showmanship. Lawless understood the power of image and used it strategically. His presence contributed to the sense that heavy metal was not just music, but a full sensory experience. Blackie Lawless remains tied to an era when controversy and indulgence were part of the same dramatic package. 18. Duff McKagan. Duff McKagan entered the spotlight as the bass player for Guns N' Roses during one of the most volatile moments in rock history. The band's rapid rise in the late 1980s created an atmosphere charged with rebellion and unpredictability. Fame hit hard, and the lifestyle that followed moved even harder. Coming from a punk background, McKagan carried a rough edge that fit perfectly into the band's chaotic image. Touring meant late nights, relentless travel, and an environment where celebration rarely slowed down. The culture surrounding Guns N' Roses became infamous, and he was living in the middle of it. Years of excess eventually took a toll, leading him to confront serious health consequences. His later transformation into a more disciplined and financially savvy figure adds depth to his story. Duff McKagan reflects both sides of heavy metal excess, the reckless rise, and the hard-earned recovery that followed. 17. Paul Stanley. Paul Stanley stood as one of the central faces of Kiss, a band that turned rock into a full-scale spectacle. With elaborate costumes, dramatic makeup, and arena-sized performances, Kiss built a brand that thrived on attention. During the height of their fame in the 1970s and beyond, touring became a non-stop cycle of performances and fan devotion. Stanley carried the confident persona of a frontman who understood charisma. The Kiss phenomenon created intense fan culture, and admiration followed the band everywhere. Backstage life reflected that energy. The line between performer and icon blurred as the band's global success continued to expand. Unlike some figures who leaned purely into chaos, Stanley maintained a sense of structure while still embracing the freedom that rock stardom offered. His polished approach balanced spectacle with control. Paul Stanley remains linked to a period when heavy metal and hard rock operated on a massive theatrical scale, fueled by fame and constant attention. Shi Liu. David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth exploded onto the hard rock scene as the flamboyant frontman of Van Halen, turning every concert into a full-blown spectacle. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, he wasn't just a singer, he was a walking headline. High kicks, split jumps, flashy outfits, and non-stop swagger made him impossible to ignore. The band's rapid rise meant sold-out arenas, private jets, and a touring schedule that barely paused for breath. Backstage, the atmosphere surrounding Van Halen became part of rock mythology. The infamous tour rider stories, the endless after-parties, and the constant crowd of admirers built Roth's image as the ultimate rock showman. He openly embraced the excess of the era, often speaking about the fast-paced lifestyle with humor and bold confidence. That unapologetic attitude strengthened his larger-than-life persona. Even after leaving Van Halen, Roth kept reinventing himself, from solo projects to radio hosting and surprise reunions. Love him or criticize him, his impact is undeniable. David Lee Roth represents the wild, flashy peak of arena rock excess, where fame, freedom, and over-the-top energy ruled the night. 15. Bret Michaels. Bret Michaels carried the image of the ultimate glam metal frontman. As the voice of Poison, he projected confidence, charm, and a carefree party attitude that defined the late 1980s. With bandanas, leather, and a permanent grin, he stepped into arenas ready to embody the dream that many fans associated with rock stardom. Poison's tours were loud and theatrical, filled with sing-along anthems and high-energy performances. The culture around the band thrived on non-stop celebration. Michaels became the face of that feel-good excess, drawing massive fan attention at every stop. His reputation for living freely blended with the larger narrative of glam metal indulgence. Years later, his reality television career extended that image to a new generation, reinforcing the persona of a lifelong bachelor surrounded by admiration. Even as trends shifted, he remained connected to the myth of rock and roll freedom. Bret Michaels stands as a heavy metal icon whose lifestyle and image became inseparable from the era's brightest spotlight. 14. Vinnie Paul. Vinnie Paul Abbott rose to fame as the powerhouse drummer of Pantera, helping define the aggressive groove metal sound of the 1990s. Alongside his brother Dimebag Darrell, he built a band that shifted heavy music away from glam flash and toward raw intensity. Their tours were loud, chaotic, and fueled by pure adrenaline. Pantera shows were not polished arena spectacles. They felt explosive and unpredictable, and that same energy carried backstage. Vinnie became known for his love of celebration. He embraced the social side of metal culture, hosting gatherings, throwing parties, and surrounding himself with friends, musicians, and fans. Stories from peers often describe him as outgoing, humorous, and always ready to turn up the volume. The touring life during that era was relentless, and he lived it fully, rarely stepping away from the noise and excitement that followed the band's rise. After Pantera disbanded, he continued performing with Damageplan and later Hell Yeah, maintaining that same larger-than-life presence. Despite the tragedies that touched his life, Vinnie Paul remained deeply connected to the metal community. He represents the brotherhood, intensity, and non-stop energy that defined heavy metal's most aggressive years. 13. Glenn Danzig. Glenn Danzig carved his own lane in heavy music long before it was fashionable to be dark, brooding, and unapologetically intense. First gaining attention with Misfits, then pushing further with Samhain and later his self-titled project, Danzig, he blended punk aggression with heavy metal atmosphere. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, his deep voice and shadowy image had become instantly recognizable. Touring during that period meant constant movement, underground venues turning into packed halls, and a growing cult following that treated every appearance like a ritual. Danzig maintained an aura of mystery, rarely overexposing himself in the media. That restraint only amplified curiosity around him. The dark lyrics, occult themes, and stripped-down but powerful stage presence created an environment that felt intense rather than flashy. Unlike glam-era frontmen who relied on bright spectacle, Danzig projected controlled power. Off-stage stories often described him as disciplined yet fiercely independent, someone who guarded his image carefully. Over decades, he remained consistent, refusing to dilute his sound or persona. Glenn Danzig stands as a symbol of heavy metal's darker evolution, where mystique, intensity, and unwavering identity defined the legend. Sheer air. And Axl Rose exploded onto the late 1980s scene with a voice that sounded dangerous and unpredictable. As the frontman of Guns N' Roses, he became the center of one of the most chaotic rises in hard rock history. Fame arrived quickly after their breakthrough album, and the world suddenly watched everything the band did. Axl's volatile personality only intensified the image. Concert delays, on-stage confrontations, and stormy relationships made headlines as often as the music did. The touring lifestyle surrounding Guns N' Roses was intense, filled with late nights, backstage crowds, and a constant sense that anything could happen. He carried himself like a star who refused to follow rules, and that unpredictability became part of the band's appeal. Romantic relationships with high-profile models added to the spotlight. Near-private drama mixed with public fame, turning his personal life into tabloid material. Axl Rose embodied the heavy metal icon whose rise was fueled by raw talent, massive attention, and a lifestyle that rarely slowed down. 11. Eddie Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen changed guitar playing forever. His innovation, speed, and technical brilliance placed him at the forefront of arena rock dominance. When Van Halen's popularity surged in the late 1970s and throughout the 80s, the band became synonymous with non-stop touring and high-energy celebration. Though Eddie often appeared more reserved than his bandmate David Lee Roth, life on the road still moved at full speed. Massive crowds, celebrity circles, and relentless schedules created a world where private life was constantly tested. His marriage to actress Valerie Bertinelli drew additional public attention, blending rock stardom with Hollywood fame. Behind the scenes, struggles with substance use showed how demanding that environment could be, yet his dedication to music never faded. Eddie's genius on guitar stood at the center of it all, even when personal challenges surfaced. He represents the heavy metal icon whose brilliance shone brightest while navigating the pressures of global fame. 10. David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth never did anything halfway. As the flamboyant frontman of Van Halen during their early dominance, he turned every performance into a spectacle. High kicks, flashy outfits, and constant showmanship made him one of the most visible faces of arena rock excess. Roth openly bragged about his conquests and wild lifestyle, feeding the larger-than-life myth that surrounded him. Tour contracts reportedly included extravagant requests, reinforcing his image as a man who expected the world to bend around his success. Backstage culture followed the same pattern. Celebration and indulgence were treated as part of the job description. His charisma drew attention everywhere he went. Fans saw him as the ultimate rock showman, confident and unapologetic. Even after leaving Van Halen, he maintained that bold persona. David Lee Roth remains a defining symbol of heavy metal excess, where confidence, fame, and indulgence blended into pure theatrical power. 9. Lemmy Kilmister. Lemmy Kilmister built his legend as the fearless leader of Motorhead, standing at the raw edge where heavy metal met unfiltered rock and roll. From the late 1970s onward, his band toured almost non-stop, delivering loud, fast, and unapologetic performances that shaped speed metal's foundation. With his bass worn high on his chest and that gravel-voiced, Lemmy looked and sounded unlike anyone else. Life on the road became his natural habitat. Long nights, constant travel, packed clubs turning into massive festival stages, he rarely slowed down. His reputation for heavy drinking, blunt interviews, and relentless stamina became part of metal folklore. Yet beneath the wild image was serious dedication. He wrote, recorded, and performed with consistency for decades, never chasing trends or softening his sound for mainstream approval. Fellow musicians across genres respected him deeply because he stayed authentic. Whether playing to thousands or hanging out at his favorite bar in Los Angeles, he remained the same straightforward, sharp-witted figure. Lemmy represented total freedom, raw honesty, and the uncompromising lifestyle that defined heavy metal at its loudest and most rebellious peak. 8. Tommy Lee. Tommy Lee built a reputation that stretched far beyond his drumming skills. As the powerhouse behind Mötley Crüe, he became one of the most recognizable faces of glam metal chaos. During the band's peak in the 1980s, their tours were infamous for excess, and Lee stood right in the middle of it all. High-energy performances blended seamlessly into wild backstage scenes. Hotel rooms turned into party zones, and after-show gatherings often became as legendary as the concerts themselves. His fearless personality matched the over-the-top image of the Sunset Strip era. Fame brought constant attention, and Lee rarely stepped away from it. His highly publicized relationships added even more fuel to his image as a rock icon who lived without limits. Headlines followed him just as closely as fans did. Through all the chaos, he remained a driving force in one of metal's most notorious bands. Tommy Lee represents the loud, unapologetic spirit that defined glam metal excess. 7. Nikki Sixx. Nikki Sixx was not just the bassist of Mötley Crüe. He was the architect of its chaos. As the band's primary songwriter and creative force, he helped craft both the music and the reckless image that made them infamous. The Sunset Strip explosion of the 1980s gave him the perfect stage for a lifestyle that pushed every boundary. Touring became a blur of neon lights, screaming crowds, and non-stop indulgence. Sixx openly documented his extreme experiences in memoirs, revealing just how far the excess went. A near-fatal overdose became one of the most shocking chapters of that era, showing how dangerous the pace had become. Yet he survived and rebuilt his life, later channeling his past into creative projects and photography. Nikki Sixx embodies the heavy metal icon who went to the edge and somehow returned. His story captures both the thrill and the cost of living at full speed inside rock's wildest decade. 6. Joe Perry. Joe Perry helped define American hard rock with gritty riffs and undeniable cool. As Aerosmith's lead guitarist, he stood alongside Steven Tyler at the center of a band whose fame soared in the 1970s. Their chemistry powered hit records, but it also fueled a lifestyle that spiraled into chaos. When the nickname Toxic Twins hinted at how intense things had become, touring schedules were relentless, and backstage scenes rarely slowed down. Celebration blended with experimentation, and the pressure of success magnified everything. Perry's quiet exterior masked a life that moved at the same wild pace as the band's music. Conflicts and substance struggles eventually led to fractures within the group, proving that even legendary partnerships could be shaken by excess. Still, his guitar sound remained sharp and influential. Joe Perry's legacy reflects the brilliance and volatility that defined heavy metal's most indulgent years. 5. Steven Tyler. Steven Tyler commanded the stage like few others could. As Aerosmith's charismatic frontman, he mixed swagger, theatrical movement, and a powerful voice into a magnetic presence. And when the band's fame exploded, the lifestyle surrounding them grew equally intense. The 1970s rock scene was fueled by fame, temptation, and non-stop touring. Tyler embraced that environment fully. Stories of late-night gatherings, blurred boundaries, and chaotic travel became part of the band's mythology. His relationship history later drew scrutiny, especially accounts involving a teenage partner during that era, reflecting how unchecked fame created controversial situations. Despite personal struggles and public criticism, Tyler rebuilt his career and maintained his place as a rock legend. His image as a fearless showman never faded. Steven Tyler represents the heavy metal icon whose talent, excess, controversy, and resilience all collided under the brightest spotlight. 4. Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne stepped into heavy music history as the unforgettable voice of Black Sabbath, helping lay the foundation for what would become heavy metal. In the early 1970s, when darker riffs and ominous themes were still new, Ozzy's haunting presence made him stand out immediately. But as the genre grew, so did the chaos surrounding it. By the time he launched his solo career, the touring lifestyle had become intense and relentless. Endless travel, packed arenas, and non-stop celebration followed him across continents. Stories of outrageous on-stage moments and unpredictable behavior strengthened his image as the Prince of Darkness. His turbulent relationships and heavy partying became part of rock folklore. Yet behind the madness was undeniable charisma. Fans connected to his vulnerability just as much as his wild side. Over time, he reinvented himself through reality television and public honesty about his struggles. Ozzy Osbourne represents the birth of heavy metal chaos, where darkness, fame, and excess collided in unforgettable ways. 3. John Bonham. John Bonham powered Led Zeppelin with thunderous force. His drumming was explosive, loud, and deeply influential, helping shape the sound of hard rock at its peak. During the 1970s, as Led Zeppelin dominated global stages, their reputation for wild touring became legendary. Bonham's larger-than-life personality matched the scale of the band's fame. Hotel destruction stories and chaotic gatherings followed the group from city to city. Success on that level created an environment where excess felt constant, and consequences seemed distant. He became known not only for musical brilliance, but also for heavy partying that rarely slowed. The intense lifestyle eventually took a tragic toll. His passing marked a devastating turning point for the band and for rock history itself. Even so, his rhythmic power remains unmatched. John Bonham stands as both a symbol of unstoppable energy and a reminder of how extreme the height of heavy metal excess could become. 2. Robert Plant. Robert Plant emerged as the golden god of rock, fronting Led Zeppelin with charisma and magnetic presence. His flowing hair, confident posture, and powerful vocals made him an instant icon during the 1970s. As the band's fame soared, admiration followed at every tour stop. The scale of Led Zeppelin's success created a non-stop environment of attention. Backstage areas filled quickly, and the energy surrounding the group rarely cooled down. Plant's charm and stage dominance reinforced his image as a symbol of rock star vitality. He embodied the idea of a frontman who thrived on movement, travel, and constant interaction with fans. While the lifestyle was intense, Plant also carried a thoughtful side that later guided his solo career. He moved beyond the chaos without losing his artistic depth. Robert Plant remains a defining figure of heavy metal's early mythology, representing charisma, freedom, and the unstoppable energy of rock at its loudest. 1. Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page closes this list as one of the most mysterious and influential figures in heavy rock history. As the mastermind guitarist of Led Zeppelin, he crafted riffs that defined an era and built an image wrapped in shadow and intrigue. During the band's global dominance in the 1970s, their touring reputation became legendary. Page's quiet, brooding personality only added to the mystique. Admirers followed the band across continents, and stories of hotel destruction and backstage excess became part of rock folklore. His relationship with young groupie Lori Maddox later drew controversy, reflecting how fame during that era often crossed troubling lines. Despite the chaos, his musical brilliance never faded. He established the archetype of the intense, brooding guitarist whose presence alone carried power. Jimmy Page remains one of heavy metal's defining icons, representing both unmatched creativity and the wild atmosphere that surrounded rock's most excessive years. So there you have it, 30 heavy metal icons who didn't just live loud on stage, but even louder behind the scenes. The music was explosive, the fame was massive, but the real chaos? That happened when the spotlight faded and the doors closed. Some wore their wild reputations like a badge of honor. Others paid a heavy price for living with no limits. In the world of heavy metal, the line between legend and scandal was razor thin. Now I've got to ask you, which story shocked you the most? If you enjoyed this deep dive into rock's most outrageous secrets, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Don't miss what's coming next.